James, I wanted to bring it back to RFK and his candidacy. It seems that he does have some type of groundswell with the population, but as you pointed out, he does seem to have a contradiction with his positions on the Israeli-Palestine conflict. Um, what do you think is, really behind that political position? And importantly, how do we maintain a secular state given these geopolitical events?
I can't see into the hearts and minds of men, so I can only speculate from the outside. Certainly, one could make the argument that because specifically RFK Jr. has been so thoroughly attacked and demonized over his position, his very right position, his good position on the not just no, but hell no to vaccine mandates, specifically on the context of, oh, but he compared vaccine passports to Nazi Germany, and he made some statement about a racial bioweapon, and of course people have twisted this, and he was attacked by the ADL and others, anti-Semitic, this and that. So one could say that he's just going out of his way, twisting double pretzel knots in order to placate and to genuflect to the state of Israel in order to, hey guys, don't worry, I'm not anti-Semitic. I'll be more pro-Israel than anyone, as a political maneuver, essentially, to head off that inevitable anti-Semitic criticism that is labeled at anyone who goes against any aspect of this agenda, whether or not it bears any relation to reality. Maybe that is just a political ploy, but everything I've ever seen from him has indicated that this isn't just a political ploy, that RFK Jr. truly does absolutely 100% support the U.S. Continuing to involve itself in direct contradiction to the principles set out by the founding fathers in entangling alliances overseas. What the hell does the United States have to do with conflicts, generational, millennium long conflicts that are taking place halfway around the globe? What is the US role in that? And why should it be spending billions upon billions of dollars per year to this other country halfway around the world so that it can defend itself? Again, what is the point of this, and why is this happening? Again, ask RFK Jr. that. Don't ask me. But as I say, I think Bobby Kennedy has done some incredibly important work, and I interviewed him about the real Anthony Fauci. I think it is an excellent book, incredibly well researched, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of footnotes for further research. He has done his homework, and I would love to see him in some debates with people like Peter Hotez, who would never debate him in a million years because they know that he would run circles around them. That is the utility of someone like Bobby Kennedy. But getting excited about someone running for office, sorry, that's just not in my blood.
Sure. Again, how do we maintain a secular state? I know that it must be done then outside of the political process, but how do we agitate from the side to stop these religious wars?
Well, how do we agitate to stop wars that are taking place halfway around the world? Seems to me like it is potentially just the wrong way of framing the question, because it implies that there is some role for the average American to do anything in particular about what is taking place halfway around the world. And I understand why that exists. And certainly, given the infrastructure of the world security state that has been erected, the global Pax Americana that came into view post World War II, and the way the world has been run essentially for the past 75 plus years, I understand why that is, whether one likes it or not, that is to some extent the reality. Your taxpayer dollars are going directly and indirectly, and through just the building up of the U.S. military, let alone other nations' militaries, towards the funding of the perpetual war state. But what is the average American's role in this? As a Canadian in Japan, what is the average Canadian in Japan's role in all of this, and what can we do about this? The fact that we are sitting here thinking about what we are, our responsibility for something that's taking place halfway around the world, is part of the problem, and I think we have to get ourselves out of that mindset. Um, the so with regards to secularization of the state, again implies that there is a role for the state in any of this. But I agree, unfortunately, with Mark said earlier that we're not really ready for anarchism yet. I think as I've said before, if I had the switch to flip to from statism to anarchism immediately and overnight, I wouldn't flip it because I know that would be mass chaos and violence and hurt for a lot of people. But having said that, I can't think of a way to conceptualize this from within the framework of nation states themselves and the state, and what should the state be doing and how should we be influencing what the state is doing. All of that is wrong. And all I know is taxpayer dollars are being sent to fuel and arm and perpetuate this type of conflict, which would not be possible if those taxpayer dollars weren't being paid in the first place. So there's perhaps the first level, and it's always the question. Okay, just don't pay your taxes, and then just wait for the men in blue to show up at your door and forcibly remove you from your home and lock you in a cage. And if you resist, you will be killed. So I know that's not a position that people should take lightly. But in terms of what else can you actually do as an individual to affect this, I'm open to suggestions.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So I've asked some people, I think the U.S. sends 4 or 5 billion a year to Israel in support. What do you think would happen if the United States just stopped their support of Israel? And would that be a bad thing, a good thing? I mean, would it just create chaos in the Middle East? What are your thoughts on that?
To listen to the lobbyists and agents of Israel in America, that would be essentially equivalent to another Holocaust, because apparently the state of Israel could not exist without those billions upon billions of dollars in direct aid every single year, which does beg the question of how and when and why this state arose and how it expects to continue functioning as a state if it directly relies on this billions of dollars of aid and could not exist without it. That must speak to something. I think that's a bit of a red herring, a charade anyway. I don't think that is the case, but anyway, that is the way that it is framed. And so I don't it from any outside perspective, if some alien descended to Earth and looked at the situation, I don't see how you would make the case that this billions of dollars of aid from America to Israel makes any sort of strategic sense on the part of the United States. What is this really about? Well, it doesn't seem to be about American interests at any rate. So puzzle me that. And how did this situation arise? And maybe it has something to do with those Israeli lobbyists and agents that are so loud and so vociferous in the United States and can so thoroughly and completely tarnish someone's reputation by simply branding them with that anti-Semitic slur.
James, what do you think is going to happen with this Al-Aqsa flood operation that recently occurred? Do you think that was an organic intelligence failure on the behalf of Israel? What do you think is going to happen with the siege of Gaza? I'll leave it at that for now.
Well, people are already calling this potentially Israel's 9/11. All right, well, let's go with that, because I think when people in the mainstream media are referring to it as that, they are talking about the official story of 9/11 and, oh my God, this surprise attack out of the blue and it killed all these innocent people, and so now we have to go avenge it. I think that's obviously what they are trying to call to mind. But hey, for people who know something about the real history of 9/11, all right, let's look at it from that perspective. So, for example, on 9/11, we were struck out of the blue by these dastardly terrorists, Al-Qaeda, which I say advisedly because if people watch my 5.5-hour documentary on the history of Al-Qaeda called False Flags, you will see that, yes, it isn't just a witty epithet. No, there is some very, very real collusion and connection between right from the founding of Al-Qaeda right on up through its existence and its amazing ability to commit these spectacular terror attacks, and the intelligence agencies like the CIA. There's many, many connections there. Well, how about in the Israel's 9/11 context? So Hamas struck out of the blue. But wait, who is Hamas and where did they come from? As is openly and totally acknowledged, and no one denies this, Hamas was brought into existence with the support of Israel, who brought Hamas into existence as a countermeasure, as a way of trying to keep Yasser Arafat contained. Well, that worked stunningly, didn't it? And oh my God, who could have imagined now Hamas is this force that is capable of this incredible surprise attack? Who could have seen it coming? And we're already starting to see the ways that the establishment media is trying to process this spectacular intelligence failure, which, if it is to be taken at face value, truly is the biggest intelligence failure, probably, presumably, in the history of the Israel state, or at least since the 1973 war. It is incredible. How could this possibly, how could an operation like this have proceeded without somebody on the inside knowing about it in advance? Well, maybe that answers its own question, right? And there has been speculation, and right now, I have no more access to any information than anyone else does out there. All I can do is take a look from the outside, but there has been speculation that this attack was known about and allowed to happen on purpose, or you can imagine the many different possibilities at any rate. But all we can say for sure is the reaction is generally where we find the real action. And what is the reaction to what is happening right now? Well, of course, obviously, this is carte blanche for the IDF to go in and start bombing Gaza and 2 million civilians, including 50% of that population being children, to smithereens. Okay, so certainly there's that. But beyond that, there was a large and growing protest movement in Israel that was centered around the Netanyahu government and the Likudniks and people fed up with the power grabs that Netanyahu was engaged in. There was some deep division, very deep divisions going on in Israeli society. IDF members quitting or threatening to quit over presumed power grabs over the Israeli judiciary, etc. All of that is now swept under the rug. Everyone, of course, in times exactly America's 9/11, Israel's 9/11, same thing. Everyone rallies around the flag. And all of those people who hated George Bush suddenly loved George Bush. And all of those people who hated Netanyahu, we will rally around the flag, rah, rah, Israel. So that is one aspect of this. Another aspect, of course, is particularly worrying. Again, exactly with 9/11 was the carte blanche for the Patriot Act and the complete obliteration of whatever was left of the Bill of Rights in the United States and knock-on effect throughout the world in the ongoing war of terror. Well, what are going to be the effects of this intelligence failure, and who could have seen it coming? Actually, I think one of the most worrying aspects of this is one of the theories that has been floated in the establishment media as to why this spectacular failure happened is because Hamas went dark. They weren't doing this online. They weren't doing this through digital communications. They weren't using their cell phones and fondle slabs and slave tracking devices to set this up. They were doing it in person-to-person, face-to-face meeting. So how will that narrative play out if that is the one that they run with? Will that mean, well, now we need even more intense surveillance, and who knows what kind of passive surveillance microphones and cameras and things will have to be installed in Gaza, obviously, but everywhere else around the world as the knock-on effect of this spectacular intelligence Pearl Harbor that just happened. Again, it's very early days and much is happening. It's a moving narrative, so I do not know which way this is going, but I could see the many ways this will play out eerily similarly to 9/11.